Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. First story I want to start with is that the Russians keep bombing themselves. Russia accidentally bombs their own village, and this is according to Russian authorities. 4 injured after Russian plane accidentally drops munitions on a Russian town. So where did this occur? 4 people were reported injured in the Russian town of Petropavlovka. This is in the Voronezh Oblast, after explosions caused the emergency release of munitions from a Russian plane. This was according to the regional governor. And this is nowhere near the front lines. If we zoom in, here's the Luhansk Oblast, and probably about 40 kilometers from the border is this tiny Russian village. And I'm going to go ahead and say, statistically, this is impossible to accidentally drop munitions and accidentally hit Russian houses. There are pictures and videos online. I'll link them down below if you want to see what the village looks like. But given the size of Russia and how empty most of Russia is, accidentally hitting houses in this village is like winning the lottery. It's so improbable. So either accidental discharge of munitions from Russian planes happens all the time and we never notice, or something unusual happened on this plane and potentially one of these Russian soldiers did it deliberately. We'll never know the truth. It's Russia, but those were bombs not used on Ukrainian civilians. Additionally, with all these drones and missiles flying over Belgorod, there's pictures and videos of missiles landing in civilian areas. This video right here went viral of a missile landing in a children's bedroom. This went viral on Russian social media saying Ukrainians are targeting Russian civilians. The problem is that this is a booster rocket for a Russian Panzer S-1 air defense system. So this was a Russian missile that fell through this roof and hit this children's bedroom. Russia is putting their own civilian lives at risk with the placement of their air defense systems and the incompetence of their soldiers, but nobody in Russia's government really cares. And here's a clip I want to share with you of a 22-year-old Russian man from Belgorod who was forced to film one of these apology videos for filming Russia's air defense systems and posting it on the internet. Let me show just a little bit of this clip.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Бабан Денис Иванович. Родился 23 февраля 2001 года в Забайкальском крае. Сегодня, 2 января, я по ошибке, по необдуманности снял видео, на котором была запечатлена на камеру наша система ПВО.
The apology video is irrelevant, but these 2 men, without their faces showing, are wearing body armor with the name SMERSH on it. I'm not familiar with SMERSH, but I know a lot of people have been talking about it. A couple months back, Solovyov on Kremlin State TV was saying Russia needs to bring SMERSH back. SMERSH was the umbrella organization for counterintelligence agencies in the Red Army. Joseph Stalin started this in 1942 and coined the name SMERSH. In the Russian language, this is basically short for death to spies. Originally focused on combating German spies infiltrating the Soviet military, the organization quickly expanded its mandate to find and eliminate subversive elements in Soviet society. This is a terrorist organization used to go after Soviet citizens, to weed out dissent and opposition to the Kremlin. And it's back. The Soviet Empire is back. Not really. Everyone hated communism. The Soviet Union was a failed experiment. But the Russians really like this map, and they want the Russian Empire 2.0. So here's a clip I want to share with you of what passes for a Russian philosopher these days, Alexander Dugin. And this is what he says about the war in Ukraine in English to foreign journalists.
Without Ukraine, Russia cannot become once more the empire. With Ukraine inside of Russian zone of control, it will become empire once more. That is a kind of law. Nothing personal. This war or military operation, special military operation in Ukraine is about that. It is about geopolitics.
So to the people of Ukraine, it's nothing personal. But if Russia wants its empire back, Ukraine is stepping stone number one. Absorb Ukraine, absorb their 40 million people, Russify them, mobilize them, and then send them to die in the next war, to get back Finland, the Baltics, Poland, Moldova, Kazakhstan, the Caucasus. What Putin and the Kremlin wants is a restoration of their pre-World War I 1914 borders, the maximum extent of the Russian Empire. And realistically, to do this, it's going to take decades. And Putin and the Kremlin are committed to this, which is why the children of Russia, every day in school, are being hammered with propaganda such as this.
Слава Советской Армии! Армии победителей! Слава Советскому народу! Народу победителей! Кто ваши деды? Наши деды победители! Чьи вы внуки? Мы внуки победителей! Что такое крест? Крест – это орудие, знак победы!
A cross is a tool and a banner of victory over sins and death. These children's grandfathers were not in World War II. I'm almost 40. My grandfathers were in World War II. These children look 10, 11, 12, 13. Maybe their great-grandfathers, but more than likely their great-great-grandfathers served in World War II. And this is what all this propaganda in the public school system is going towards. An 18-year-old Russian has become the youngest person confirmed to have died fighting for Russia and Ukraine. His death only 2.5 months after signing up, following the Russian government's decision in 2023 to let teenagers go to war straight from high school. So you're going to get 12 years of primary education, marching in step, only learning about Russian history and World War II after they were betrayed by the Nazis. And then you get to join the military to go fight in their wars of colonialism and empire. Glory to the empire. This story normally I would save for the end as a feel-good clip, but this is a huge newsworthy event. Wednesday sees largest single POW exchange, 230 Ukrainians return home. Russia and Ukraine said Wednesday that they had exchanged hundreds of captive soldiers in a UAE brokered deal, the first such prisoner of war exchange since June. Russia has been denying these exchanges for 7 months, so I don't know what the Emiratis did or said, but thank you so much to the government of the United Arab Emirates for convincing the Russians to continue prisoner of war exchanges. Here's the statement from Zelensky. 230 of our people. Today, 213 soldiers and sergeants, 11 officers, and 6 civilians returned home. I am grateful to everyone who achieved this result. We remember each and every one of our people, and we must return all of them. Let me share a couple clips from this joyous event.
Слава Україні!
Here's another clip of them getting off the bus and breaking out into song.
Слава
last note is always a little bit hard to hit. And the intelligence chief Budanov personally went to the exchange site to welcome back these Ukrainian POWs. You can see this is what passes for joy on his face.
Це для історії, так. Сьогодні відбувся найбільший обмін за період повномасштабного вторгнення. 230 українців і українок повертаються додому. І ось
Тут, напевно, зверху щось.
ми це там закріпимо. Ось така от сьогодні чудова дата і чудова світло. Так.
Дуже дякую. Я знаю, що безпосередньо
The largest prisoner of war exchange to happen to date, and for the last 7 months, Ukraine's government never gave up on getting as many of their people back as possible. And 48 of these Ukrainian prisoners of war released were considered missing in action. Now they're coming home. Imagine the immense joy of their families learning that their loved ones were still alive and would be included in this prisoner of war exchange. Among these 200 Ukrainian prisoners of war freed today, there are defenders of Snake Island, as well as National Guardsmen taken prisoner in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. This was from the earliest days of the full-scale invasion. These men have been POWs for almost 2 years. Imagine their surprise now that they're coming back home to Ukraine, which is still holding 80% of its territory, has defeated the Russians in Kyiv, in Chernihiv, in Sumy, in Kharkiv, in northern Donbass, Kherson, and in the Black Sea. A huge accomplishment. But what about the Russians? The Russian POWs that wanted to be returned to Russia. The way it works is Ukraine always gives them the option. If a Russian POW wants to remain in Ukrainian custody for the rest of the war, they're not forced to go back. And allegedly 248 Russian servicemen were released back to Russia. This is how Russian state media covered the event.
через 5 часов, грубо говоря, буду дома.
No flags, no singing, no emotional phone calls. Their intelligence chief isn't going to go to the exchange site to meet these men. And it's because Russia doesn't care about these men. If they live or die, if they're returned. And here's a clip I'm going to link down below. I've seen a lot of disturbing pictures and videos, but the sound in this clip really got to me. It's not gory or graphic, but this phone was taken from a dead Russian soldier. So we don't know the context of who these people are or why one of these Russian soldiers is being brutally beaten. But he's tied up to a pole, and I'm assuming this is his commander or some type of enforcer just mercilessly beating him as he screams in agony. This is how the Russian military keeps their conscripts and mobilized men in line. The majority of the Russians fighting in Ukraine did not sign a contract wanting to be there. They're being forced to be there, and the only way to keep them in line is through cruelty and brutality. It's the only way to force these human meat wave attacks. I'll link it down below if you want to see how the Russians treat their own soldiers. And here's Solovyov, the propagandist-in-chief. With his new talking point, he's been repeating this a lot recently. And he keeps saying that war is the natural state of man, that it's normal and healthy for every man to go off to war, because that is when he becomes a real man. So here's Solovyov on a daytime talk show, repeating this new favorite talking point of his. Let them be afraid of us. That's not the point. I know this will sound harsh and they'll probably say bad things later. The truth is that man was born for war, not peace. War shows people so much, so you see who's who, so everything unnecessary disappears. Yes, it's awful. Yes, it's terrible. If you look in the history of mankind, there have always been very few years without war. Peace is forged by war. Men always live in war. This is a really weird setup with this guy wearing a ski mask and blue jeans, but Solovyov is doing his best to trick stupid young men in Russia to sign contracts and go and fight for the empire. Meanwhile, Solovyov has 2 adult sons of military age that are not serving in the military. Solovyov would never let his sons go fight in a war. So apparently the natural state of his sons, one is a male model living in London, the other works in television in Moscow. You'd think, you'd hope that ordinary Russians would pick up on this hypocrisy, but for some reason, Solovyov continues to get away with it. Let's now switch it up and talk about the upcoming presidential elections in Russia. This is pretty exciting. And the ballot has been finalized. These are the 11 candidates that you can vote for in the upcoming Russian presidential elections. All of the voting will be electronic, so it doesn't matter where you touch on the screen, Putin will get your vote. And it looks like we've got 2 prostitutes and a bunch of people I've never seen or heard of before, except this guy. I've seen this guy on Kremlin State TV before. His name is Boris Nadezhin, and when asked about his presidential campaign the next 2 months, all he has to say is, you know, I hope to remain alive, free, and not a foreign agent at the end of this election campaign. Boris was nominated for the presidency by Civil Initiative. He's considered, I guess, like a moderate in Russia. But of course, he has the Kremlin's approval. Of course, everything he says and does still supports Putin and the Kremlin. Here's another presidential candidate. This is Andrei Bogdanov. Asked if he plans on winning the presidency.
Вы планируете победить?
Конечно нет. Я на идиота похож?
Вы планируете победить?
Конечно нет. Я на идиота похож?
That's some refreshing honesty from a politician, but yes, all of these people were selected by the Kremlin. They all know they're not supposed to campaign, win, or be critical of Putin at all. Putin is going to get 90 to 95% of the vote because it's not a real election. The US Congress is back in session, I believe, and we're going to start talking about House Republicans blocking a simple up or down vote on additional military aid to Ukraine. U.S. National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby said, the United States will not be sending Ukraine any more direct military aid until Congress passes additional military aid. Now, there is still $4 billion in presidential drawdown authority under the Foreign Assistance Act, but that's money for any conflict that happens anywhere in the world. If Venezuela invades their neighbor, if Iran makes a move against Israel, if there's a war on the Korean Peninsula, if China starts trouble with our allies in the South China Sea, that's what that $4 billion is for. So Congress needs to do its job and schedule a simple up or down vote on additional military aid for Ukraine. There are no excuses. And Republicans are off to a rough start in 2024. This is another member of Congress leaving his office. Ohio Representative Bill Johnson is set to resign from Congress on January 21st because he accepted a position as president of Youngstown State University. So in the last 2 months, House Republicans, who had a razor-thin majority, just lost 3 members. This guy, Bill Johnson, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy resigned, and then George Santos was expelled for corruption and fraud. What this means is that Republicans now can only ever lose 2 votes, and they no longer have a majority. This was the balance of power, 213 versus 221, going back 2 months ago. Republicans are now down to 219. Meaning that if Speaker Johnson wants to continue blocking a vote on Ukraine, we only need 3 House Republicans to trigger a vote, remove Speaker Johnson, and then we only need 3 Democrats, House Democrats, to vote for a different Republican speaker that will allow a simple up or down vote on military aid to Ukraine. So January is going to get crazy. Nobody knows what's going to happen. More Republican members of Congress could announce early retirements and leave office, so the next couple weeks is going to get really weird. Congress leaders see new hope for spending deal to prevent a government shutdown. For those of you in the comments, I know you're going to say it. Well, why doesn't President Biden just close the border and pass immigration reform of some form that the Republicans want? I'm being candid and honest here. I don't know what the Republicans want. Immigration here in the United States has been broken for 40 years. It's not going to be fixed this month in a single vote. So if Republicans want to force immigration reform, just shut down the government. Shut down the entire federal government until the Democrats and President Biden closes the border or passes immigration reform to your satisfaction. We don't have to involve our allies overseas. Ukrainians don't have to die. There are other issues you could pair immigration reform to, such as the government shutting down or funding the government to get what you want. But I've expressed my opinion on this channel numerous times. I think House Republicans are deliberately trying to kill additional military aid to Ukraine by tying it to immigration reform. So if you're a Republican voter, please contact your representatives. Let them know that this is unacceptable and that Republicans will pay a price for betraying democracy around the world and alienating our democratic allies. This is shameful, this is embarrassing, this is unacceptable. And for the next 11 months, I'm going to be repeating this here on this channel. It's not okay to let Ukrainians die, to fight partisan politics on an issue that no one solved in 40 years. Final feel-good clip I am going to attempt to play. It does involve music, so the music might be blocked for copyright reasons by YouTube. I'll link it down below, but this is a Ukrainian defender playing the violin for his son. This Ukrainian defender knows he might not survive this war, but he wanted to film this video combining his love for music, his love for playing the violin, and he wanted to play for his son, so his son knew he loved him. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.